Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Ahmad Adli bin Ahmad Asri, and our group has been tasked to present to you about the Great Depression that took place during the 1930s. It all began in the United States and then spread across the world within the similar period. It was the most horrible, deepest, and longest depression of the 20th century. It is the example of how intense the global economy can decline. It all began somewhere around September 1929, after stock price of United States had a major fall and becomes worldwide news a month later. Worldwide gross domestic product, also known as the GDP, fell by the estimated 15%, and some economies started to recover by the mid-30s. However, in many countries, the negative effects of the Great Depression lasted until the beginning of World War II. Cities across the world become paralyzed, especially the major cities that depend entirely on heavy industry. So, other than that, the farming communities and the rural areas suffers. Crop price fell at about 60%. Next, we are going to look at the two classic competing economic theories, which is the Keynesian and the monetarist explanation. There are also heterodox theories that reject the explanation between the two. Keynesian's basic idea was simple: to keep people fully employed, government must run deficit when the economy is slowing, as the private sector would not have invest enough to keep the production at the normal level and bring the economy out of recession. Secondly, the monetarist view explained that the cause was made by banking crisis that caused 1/3 of all banks to vanish. This is called the Great Contraction. So there are two main weaknesses of the modern monetarist view. The first one is not being able to explain why the demand for money was falling more rapidly in 1930 and 1931. Secondly, it's not able to explain why the recovery took place, although second interest rate remained close to zero and the money supply was still fading.
The Great Depression has a lot of effects in terms of society, economy, unemployment, and in terms of politics. Firstly, in terms of society, the Great Depression affects 23 states in America, where those states were beginning to suffer a drought. The event of this drought is called Dust Bowl drought, and this is the first effect that took place, caused by the decline of international trade and also the imposing of tariffs towards hundreds of products. Imposing of tariffs was supposed to help the farmers, but what happened was vice versa. Secondly, in terms of economy, two big banks in America were suffering a failure in just a span of 2 months, which led to many other banks to fail. The reason why banks are starting to fail is because of bank run. That is resulted from many people rushing to deposit their savings from their banks. Most of the banks does not have an access to reserves to handle their bank run, which affect more than 1,000 banks to fail. Thirdly, in terms of unemployment, the unemployment in United States reached the new height from 4.2% into 25% in just a span of 5 years. The unemployment rate peaked during 1933, which almost 15 million people were left jobless. It was the highest unemployment rate ever in the history of the United States. Lastly, in terms of politics, as the laissez-faire economics that is favored by President Herbert Hoover failed miserably, Franklin Roosevelt's Keynesian economics becomes the number one solution to end the Great Depression. As Franklin Roosevelt becomes the president, a new program was introduced under the Keynesian economics, which is the New Deal. Resulting from the New Deal, economy in the country achieved a growth of almost 17%, and many people thought that the Great Depression was coming to an end. However, it resumed as the government decided to cut their spending. The Great Depression saw it end as United States enters World War II.
In 1932, Mr. President Franklin D. Roosevelt promised to create federal government program to end the Great Depression. Within 100 days, he signed the New Deal into law, creating 42 new agencies throughout its lifetime. They were designed to create jobs, allow unionization, and provide unemployment insurance. Many of these programs still exist. They help safeguard the economy and prevent another depression. Many argue that World War II, not the New Deal, ended the depression. Still, others contend that if FDR has spent as much of New Deal as he did during the war, it would have ended the depression. In 9 years between the launch of New Deal and the attack on Pearl Harbor, FDR increased the debt by $3 billion. In 1942, defense spending added $23 billion to the debt. In 1943, it added another $64 billion. The drop in investment in 1942 reflects the US government taking over the financing of plant and equipment for World War II. At this point, it is worthwhile establishing a more general theory of what determines the level of demand and output in an economy. If consumer purchase is a function of income, which in turn is a function of GDP, then we must look to the components which are not function of GDP, what are called autonomous demands, for the determinant of demand. The level of autonomous demand is the sum of investment purchases, government purchases, and net export. The relationship between GDP and AAD is strong, but World War II years do not fall on the line because during that time consumers were not allowed to buy as much as they want to and had the income for. The conclusion is that GDP recovered from the depression because the combined total of investment, government purchase, and net export grew to a level that pushed GDP to full employment and full utilization of capacity. Thus, business saw the need of additional capacity and hence investment recovered.
So, in conclusion, the Great Depression had negatively influenced the US manufacturing towards their economy, and that leads to their economy being made stuck, and uncertain procedures were used to undertake in order to recover from that event. After the tragedy, United States government examined and eliminated the frameworks that didn't work to shield the country from future difficulties that might occur within their economy. So the Great Depression 1930 has taught them to be more cautious with what could be remain and what need to go. That's all from us. Thank you for your time.